The Source Engine. It's beautiful, it's fast, and it's largely responsible for an entire generation's childhood. I wanted to explore some of the very interesting technology behind the Source Engine, and how it contributed to its unique visual style, and why it still holds up so well today. As most everyone knows at this point, the Source Engine is built on top of the previously created Gold Source Engine, used for Half-Life 1, which itself is a modification of the Quake engine. A key feature of these engines is a common technique called baked lighting. While it isn't unique to them specifically, it's certainly a large part of the overall visual style and their incredible performance. Simply set at 350 degrees and place in a few lights, and you'll have a beautiful map in an hour. The general purpose of baked lighting is to help reduce the amount of computation on a player's end when it comes to lighting the environments. This was especially important for the time period in which these engines were used. By saving all of the expensive light calculations on a very large image one time when the map is first created, all your GPU has to do is take this special image and splatter it absolutely everywhere. Where most games still use and implement the same kind of baked lighting seen in the Gold Source and Quake engines, Source goes one step further with its calculations. I've hardly ever seen the specifics of this documented before online, and that is largely what inspired me to make this video in the first place. Radiosity normal mapping, as they call it. Not as appetizing as it sounds, I promise, but it's one of the main spices behind Source's lighting. To understand what makes it so special, we'll have to make a slightly nerdy detour into what exactly baked lighting is in the first place. The typical older style of baked lighting that was used in Gold Source is usually what people think of first. In computer games, and most 3D graphics for that matter, images, or textures, are drawn onto surfaces by using a special set of coordinates on the surface that tells your GPU which part of the texture to use at each point. Baked lighting is very similar. However, where typical textures may be repeated several times across a single surface, baked lighting is essentially one massive texture that covers the entire environment only once. Similar to how, when sewing, your pattern is at first just one large piece of fabric or material that is then stitched together into a shape with depth and stuff. Baked lighting textures also usually take up a lot more visual real estate. Where a typical texture's texture pixels may be very small when seen in game, a lighting texture's pixels are usually very large. Source's baked lighting approach, while the same at heart, has a pretty key difference that makes a huge difference to how visually appealing they end up looking. When it comes to lights and their very naughty behavior in the real world, the amount of light that is accumulated on something is dependent on the angle in which the light hits it. Steeper angles mean less light, and a shallower angle means more light. The normal way of accounting for this in the baked lighting approach is to take the normal, that is, the overall direction of the entire surface, and use that one value to determine this steepness factor for the entire surface. This alone is responsible for why, a lot of the time, baked lighting can look very flat. It doesn't account for all the little bumps and dips in the surfaces because it can't. There simply just isn't enough detail with how comparatively low resolution the lighting textures are. The naive solution, then, would be to increase the resolution of these textures such that there would be enough pixels to account for this detail. However, unfortunately, computers, I think, have limited storage, and that would absolutely balloon the amount of memory that a map might require to even be loaded. Clever people, those Valve guys, because not only have they cured cancer 3 times, but they've solved this terrible problem with our baked lighting. What can be done instead of increasing the prices of RAM even more? More textures. That's where the normal mapping part of the Radiosity normal mapping comes from. The Radiosity part is a different video altogether. As opposed to just making a single texture to represent all of the lighting across an environment like its predecessors, Source creates 3 different textures, all the same size as before. Some smart engineer somewhere found 3 angles that can collectively describe not only the amount of lighting that is at each point in space, but also which direction the light is coming from. Recall back to how light reacts differently as the angle between the light and the surface change. 3 textures and 3 angles obviously mean Half-Life 3. It also means that we can have each of these 3 textures represent these 3 angles on each surface. Instead of using the overall facing direction of the entire surface for the steepness factor like before, we use these angles relative to the overall direction and calculate lighting 3 times with each angle for each one of the 3 textures. With that, we can accurately describe how light is hitting the surface and from where, all using the same 3 textures. We're actually still missing one key component, which is this very strange purplish texture. If we look into it long enough, it'll tell us its dirty dark secrets. This texture's real secret is that it can describe extra detail when it comes to lighting. Suffice it to say, when each pixel is drawn to the screen, the GPU does some math using this texture, which is called a normal map or bump map, and just by slightly nudging the direction of the surface at each pixel by using this texture, we can fake more detail than is actually there. Let's take a look at this example. The green arrow pointing slightly more downward, red slightly up and to the right, and the blue up and to the left to make all men feel equally valid. If we have something emanating light in this position to the bottom and to the right, then the total color we have can be found by summing up all the colors at this point in all 3 textures based on how similar the directions corresponding to each texture are to the overall surface direction and weighting them accordingly. If that sounds like a complicated way to do the same thing as before, it is right now. Let's bring back in that silent purple texture from earlier. Despite the baked lighting having a very low resolution, if we use the purple texture's secret magic to nudge the surface direction at each pixel and sum up the light using the same method as before, we've extracted more hidden detail from the baked lighting. What other secrets could it possibly be hiding? Not many, actually. There are a few other interesting techniques that the Source engine does to improve its visuals and make everything overall more appealing to look at, but a lot of it isn't nearly as in-depth or interesting as the Radiosity normal mapping. Plus, most of the other techniques are pretty easy to find people talking about, such as half-Lambert lighting for the characters. So, that begs the question, why doesn't every mainstream engine do this if it improves the quality of such an efficient technique? My personal opinion is just that it's gone under the radar. All of this is information that I've found through my own personal digging during the development of my own engine, and the papers describing this technique were very hard to find the first time around. I also think that, in a way, it's such a good technique that most people probably didn't even notice there's anything special at first glance. I think another element is the general shift away from baked lighting in games. People are sort of jumping ship to the other real-time approaches for achieving lighting, especially since ray tracing and the like allow us to achieve similar visual quality and effects to the ones that were exclusive to expensive lighting programs previously. I do think there's something a little bit sad about that, though, as it does mean a lot of people are kind of getting left behind. I'm glad it seems Valve is continuing to use this approach for Source 2, and I'm excited to see what they make with it next. Half-Life 3, maybe? Until then, though, I can wishfully think that someone who knows someone important or special gets an idea from this video, and will then go on to implement this special improvement for baked lighting into larger engines like Unity or Godot, as a means to provide it to people making games with those engines. It's yet another chunk of gold from the ultimate goldmine that is the Source engine and its various techniques. I plan on, hopefully, making videos about other things interesting that I find about the Source engine. I love finding information on how some of my favorite games work under the hood, and with how big the Source engine is, I'm honestly shocked that more videos talking about these sorts of technical details don't exist. It's especially difficult to find somewhat more digestible technical dives, which I hope to somewhat aid with this video. I feel like there's a lot to be learned from an engine like Source, even some 20 years later after its very first debut.